So here we are with, let's see if I get this right. So it's going to be DJ,
Uh-huh.
coach, singer, songwriter, musician,
Yeah.
overall just amazing creative. My very, very good friend, Arash Haile, but better known as Shammy D. I'm so happy to have you, man.
Thanks for having me on, David. It's good
Oh,
to see you, man.
no problem. No problem. So yeah, man, for me, when I think of creatives just making it happen, especially with everything that's going on and being just very focused to the people that they serve, you're one of the first people that comes to mind. And
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
oh man, it's the truth, you know. So I guess for me, where I would like to start is just everything that's been happening with the pandemic, right? So of course being a creative during all this stuff has been extremely stressful. Essentially the gigs have dried up, right?
Yeah.
Not even dried up, they've been blocked. Nothing.
Yeah.
If you're Most people think of musicians and artists and whatnot, but really it's DJs, it's everybody who supports these venues, everybody who works in the venues,
Right.
uh, the wait staff, the kitchen staff, everybody, right? Everybody's out. So walk me through what happened, right? As a creative, as someone who does all this work full time, what happened when the pandemic started?
Absolutely. So for people who don't know who I am or what I do, I'm a full-time DJ slash creative, but DJing is the bread and butter for me. And when the pandemic hit, we were learning about it late January, February, and it I was seeing hints of it in February that it was about to go down. So Bloomingdale's is one of my clients. I was DJing in one of their probably like biggest store in Southern California for sure, South Coast Plaza, and there I had one gig there on a Saturday, and literally the week, if not like the day before, a couple days before, a news report came out that someone had COVID and was in the mall, that particular mall. So I get there and it's almost like a ghost town. And all the employees at the different, I was in cosmetics, so people at the perfume station were just like, literally, no one's been in the store. And it came out that it was a false report, but at that time the damage is done. Nobody was there. So it got a sense of like, this is going to be potentially really damaging for all of us if it could knock out how a store was doing within a week. And then it wasn't until like March that for me, in the span of 3 days, everything got wiped out. Right, definitely up through the summer, definitely up through the summer. And I'm talking like I got heads up that a theater job that I was doing in mid to late spring was done. Uh, all Norsham is another one of my clients, so all their events for the spring season was out. Um, Hotels and bars that I would DJ had done, and so literally like dunzo. So then we get the report that we have to be in quarantine. So as I'm like panicking, not like panicking, go crazy, but just thinking, what am I going to do? And I think that was the question that all creators had, like, what are we going to do? This is our primary source of income. And so what happens next? So we get the quarantine order, and the next morning I wake up and I'm like, just show up. There was a voice in me that said, just show up and be present. Part of that came from I think people. I don't know if you're familiar with Grant Cardone.
Oh man, are you kidding me?
Yeah, right. Who isn't, right? But I remember a while back I seeing one of his posts where he was talking about in times of economic contraction, people tend to hold on. That's the time you need to like really go forward. Now, I think he was also talking about marketing, putting money down in marketing and expanding. Look, if you have the wherewithal to do that, yes, then spend the money and keep showing up. But if you don't, the critical point of what he was saying was just be present, be aware, have people be aware of who you are. This isn't the time to hold back with what you're doing. So in my mind, I wake up and I'm just like, show up. And I start live streaming. And I start with Facebook. and I'm doing DJ sets, and people are getting down. They're loving the DJ sets. I'm getting good vibes, good responses from it, and then I keep pushing it forward. I go from once a week to 2 times a week to now I'm DJing 3 times a week online. I dealing with all like the Facebook takedown issues and muted stuff, but whatever. We're just figuring it out.
Well, hold on,
And
hold on. I gotta stop you there. The Facebook takedown issues. What is this about?
Facebook has these issues with copyrights. So for DJs in particular, when you're playing other people's music that you do not have the rights to, they just do a general takedown notice like you can't do this. Sony is claiming your rights to your video, and I think basically they're saying they're making sure you're not profiting off of other people's songs. So it's a whole complicated. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can talk about, but it's that issue for a lot of DJs meant that their streams were getting cut. I was getting kicked off Facebook multiple times. Instagram was being a hard ass about it until D Nice did his thing. You know, D Nice kind of has a special. He cracked the code. He knows people and got the code cracked, so he can play with no issues. But for most of us, it's a big deal that we still have trouble navigating. So dealing with that with Facebook and but still showing up and trying to stream as often as possible. And then I took it to, this is not going to be a long story, it sounds like, but
That's okay. That's good.
all right. So then so keep doing that. And then I think about, well, what else can I do? And then I had the idea because I was inspired by there were DJs in Italy during their quarantine that were setting up their equipment on their balcony and playing for their neighbors. And I was like, that's kind of tight. I want to do something like that. And I did. So one Saturday, I just set up on the roof and start playing. And I'm super nervous about it. You know, I'm like, what's going to happen? I have no clue. But the response was super dope. People came out on their balconies, were dancing, and they had a good time. That video is up on my Instagram. So you can literally get a whole sense of like what the night was like. And then I just kept doing that, right? Every Saturday I'd show up around the same time during sunset and just play for the people on top of live streaming. So then that became a thing. It took off in its own way, got caught on LA news stations, KTLA and ABC. Somehow made its way to Ellen. So that was crazy. So that got syndicated or syndicated, right? Got caught on a syndicated show. And then I had stopped that. And the next thing that I did was doing these DJ pop-ups. So basically it's like drive-in shows, like drive-in theaters, but instead of movies, you listen to me play and I have projections on a wall behind me. So I was doing that for a strong, like 4 or 5 months. That paused in September. No, I think September, yeah. And looking to get that going again. So those are like the main things that I was doing with DJing during the pandemic.
I mean, there's so much stuff that, for me, when I hear all this, it's so inspiring, right? I mean, there's a lot I'm going to ask you about your mindset, and you brought up Greg, and I know you're a student of Gary Vee and all these other people, these marketing people, that I listen to, that I think have so much useful and powerful advice for musicians. But let's get to that later.
Yeah.
The way that you saw this super difficult situation and your immediate reaction was, okay, what else can I give to these people? How can I make other people feel better in the middle of all this? I remember when you posted that video, that Instagram video of you just setting up on a rooftop, I said, damn, this is dope. This is really, really cool. This is what musicians, I'm not going to say should be doing, but when they do things like this, it means so much, and it was very inspiring to see that. My other question is, did you ask anybody, or did you just show up with these speakers on your rooftop and just pointed it to somebody? I mean, was there any kind of planning for that, or did you just shoot first, ask questions later?
It was shoot first, ask questions later. Yeah. I know I wasn't going to get any kind of okay from nobody. So it's just kind of like, fuck it, let's go. Like,
Right. Cool, man. Well,
And you're right. Like it is about like what we all have gifts, and in a time that we may not be able to monetize on these gifts, people still need entertainment. People still need music. People still need something to take their mind off what's going on. So one of the things that kept me going was getting texts from people after a live stream saying, oh my gosh, that I was in a bad place today. That really lifted my spirits. I needed to hear that. Or, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I feel so much better after listening to, your music today. And it just showed me that we as musicians and artists still have value to people, regardless of the fact that we're not in a place where we can make money from that just yet, or we were figuring out like what to do, how to make money. I The fact that you are out there sharing these things leave impressions in people, other people's minds, like you just shared, right? Yesterday I had a gig for UCSD, their homecoming event, and one of the guys that was in the control room handling all the live streams from the different locations was like, I remember you were one of the first people that was live streaming that I tuned into. They
wow.
remember that. I didn't, and I had no idea, right? Until he told me. And I was like, oh, wow. So it just goes to show that people are paying attention. And if you're proactive about your career, or if you're proactive about the moment, then things will happen. Things can happen. You don't know what's going to happen, but you have to take action, and you allow what's to come to come.
For sure, for sure. And just to emphasize exactly what you said as well, I think there's a lot to this whole music industry, this including DJs.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of the performance aspect that is extremely therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
For everyone involved, right? So of course, if I mean, I used to love going out and dancing salsa and bachata. For me, that was fun, but there's a therapy for it, right? As I mean, I wouldn't play; I would go just to dance, and you would meet people and have fun. There's therapy that behind that, but there's also therapy for the musicians, right? Everything is very therapeutic in that entire situation, and that's one of the other things that I noticed with your sets, even your live stream sets that I tuned into, and also these I'm sure with the pop-up sets, you're providing a sort of therapy for everyone that really needs it right now in this really tough time. So all I can say is thank you for providing.
Oh man.
You know,
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm happy to be a part of that. And another way to look at it is, to some degree, entertainment is escapism,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's not lost on me that as a DJ in clubs, like we're basically another way to sell alcohol, right? Like at least that's one thing, right, that we do, that we don't necessarily sign up for, but it's a part of the experience for a club owner. That's how they make their money. So it's what is all that, right? People go out, have fun, and they escape the realities of the world. Alcohol is a form for people to do that. When it goes too far, it can become problematic for some. But it's an escape, and we need that.
Mhm.
We definitely need that, and we needed it a lot more when all this started happening. And not to say we need it any less now, because it's just as crazy, if not more crazy than before politically. But it's we are helping people forget about the troubles of the world, even if for half an hour, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with, I mean, even before the pandemic, I remember the Sherman Oaks Galleria, they were often having these like silent, everybody wears earphones and it was a DJ.
Disco.
What I mean? And I thought, damn, what a cool idea this is. You know what I mean? You can have these basically anywhere. And now, if they're all Bluetooth, you can socially distance everything. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I would be very interested to see what we can do moving forward. I know the fall is supposed to be really bad, right? So, I mean, I think we all should assume that everything is going to close up again. But hopefully, in the spring, we need to get this music back. We need to get these performances back. People are going crazy, and like we're talking about, I think they need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say get them back, what do you mean?
Well, in some way, as I see it, and as I see things playing out,
Mhm.
things aren't going to be to the point where, for example, one of my favorite venues was La Granada in Los Angeles. In my opinion, the best dancing venue in all of Los Angeles. I mean, the way that it looked, the space, they had the best live bands basically every weekend. To see them live, you would pay cover, and the cover wasn't crazy. It was perfect. Of course,
Mhm.
they had a salsa bachata DJ upstairs, live band on the bottom, and then reggaeton outside. It was fantastic. Tons of people every time I went. I don't see that happening even until 2021, the
Yeah,
summer of 2021. I would be very surprised to see it fall 2021. I would hope to see it by 2022, right? That's
yeah,
what I back. These huge festivals, you know what I mean, where you get thousands of people in the same place, not worried about anything. I don't think that's going to happen for a while. Hopefully, what I'm hoping is that we find ways around this. Of course, limiting the amount of people that can be in one place, but that's what I'm getting it back because those kind of experiences for the musicians, for the performers, and for the audience. I think it's like I said, it's just therapeutic. We need it. You know.
totally, totally. So then here's the question, right? If you talk, you said you mentioned mindset. So in yesterday's homecoming show, they had Switchfoot perform as well. So I'm DJing this thing, hosting this thing. Switchfoot performs, and we're done, and we're chopping it up afterwards. And he's asking me, like, one of the guitar players is like, "So what are you all doing as DJs?" To And I'm like, "Oh, live streaming is like the thing." And in conversation, we both agreed that the people who are being proactive about the artists and musicians that are being proactive about their careers now are the ones that are going to be ahead when everything comes back. And so, yes, we all agree. 100 million% agree with you that we need to have these experiences come back because it's good for our soul. It's good for the health of the people, right? Therapeutic, but it's not coming back. We don't know when it's coming back.
Right.
All we can hope for 2022 at the latest. We can hope for the vaccine to come. The question becomes in the now and in the meantime, between now and when things open back up, what can you do to create that therapy for others? Because the way that the clubs operated was one way of that happening. It's not the only way, but it's the most social way, quote unquote, of how we experienced entertainment. Now it just looks different. Now it's more isolated, if you will, with live streaming and things like with basically live streaming. And if you were doing a live experience like a drive-in theater, let's say, you are still communing, you are still in communal space with people. You're sharing a parking lot, but the experience is still within your car. So there's still something isolated within that. That experience is different from like a theater where everybody's sitting in the same row, everybody's laughing at the same time. It's a completely different energy, but you can still deliver an experience. And so the question that came up for me and the question that I was thinking about throughout the whole time of the pandemic is what can I be doing to just show up? And it forces me to look at what do I have available at my disposal to make something happen versus throwing my hands up and saying, well, that's it, I'm screwed. That's defeatist. Like nothing happens at that point.
Damn. Damn. Okay, so what are some things that musicians and creatives can do right now? How do you see this playing out, at least for the next 6 months? What are some things that people can start being proactive in, at least these avenues?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think it all depends on, well, it depends on what you do and what you'd like to do. I I
Let's
don't know how this is. Yes.
let's focus it to like performers, I guess, right now. So like
Yeah.
musicians, DJs, things like this.
Great. Okay. So we can hope for things to come back the way they were. I don't know if hoping for things is going to do anything for our career specifically.
Right.
I am a full proponent of live streaming is going to be the thing. The thing about pandemics, and my coach says this, pandemics of this magnitude accelerate what's going to happen, what was already going to happen. So the live industry model, as we saw it, was going to break at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic took what would have happened in 30 years and brought it into 6 months, right? So if we were looking at live shows as the only way that we can make money or the only way that we can perform, and now that avenue is gone, then what do I have as a performer at my disposal that I could use to showcase? I look at two things. One, what can I use to showcase my abilities? And what can I use to generate a fan base? Because as performers, that's really what we're looking for. Why do we need a fan base? We need a fan base that'll help sustain the art that we are making. And today's technology of live streaming, social media, and payment processors like Venmo, Cash App have really changed the game for a lot of people. A lot of people.
Oh, for sure, and things like Twitch too. I mean, shout out to Louis Valenzuela here in San Diego. He's he's moved his whole jam online, and I can link to it here to this video.
Yeah.
But what he's doing is, I think, tremendous. You know, he's moving his what usually was done in person. He's having just the few people that usually perform and just live streaming it. And you're exactly right. Things like Venmo, the Cash App, you can send these people money as if you're there. You know what I mean? And it allows them to keep going and keep doing all these things. Um, I also think you're completely right with the acceleration. I mean, there was a lot of things happening with venues when I was working as a musician, and I would speak with other musicians that the musicians would be confused about in terms of like pay to play kind of situations and all these different things. Like the venues themselves were under a lot of pressure before the pandemic, right? So I think you're completely right. It's very interesting to think about this really as a way for things to open up and for new avenues of making a sustainable living in the arts come to fruition. Really, you know,
Yeah.
wow, super
Yeah.
super.
Like there's one on Facebook. I'm friends with one UCSD alum. Her name is Stephanie Schmitz, I think. She plays, I think she was in jazz. She was in the music department when I was there, or when we were there. And what she has done consistently, I have to give her props for this, is that she's been playing a song a day every day since the pandemic.
Wow.
Literally a song a day every day. And sometimes she'll partner up with other musicians. Sometimes it'll just be solo. Sometimes she'll be live uh, out maybe in on a front yard and like playing for people. They'll come out and vibe. But every day she shows up. And maybe, oh, am I there?
You're
My
here.
camera. Okay. Um, every day she showed up. Huge, right? Even if I don't listen to everything she does on the daily, I see her every day and I'm like, oh, she's doing something, right? That consistency will mean something when everything comes back together. When you show up consistently, people notice, people remember. And when we all come back to whatever normal looks like, your name will be the ones that pop up because people remember the things that you did
Mm-hmm.
during this time. You will never have, barring another pandemic, there will never be another opportunity like this. So I hear both sides of the spectrum. Like some people are like, you know, if you're feeling down, you don't have to feel like you have to achieve and do the most. And I understand that and respect that. If you feel like you want to do something and show up, then I understand that, respect that. This is the train that I'm on. And because I know that there will be a payoff at the end of it. What that payoff will look like, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I have seen things pay off over time. And it's the repetition of showing up consistently that's going to do stuff for you as a performer. And this is, I think, any way you should be doing this. I don't like to use the word should, but I highly recommend you consider incorporating live streaming into what you do as an artist and as a performer, because this is eventually something you were going to have to do anyway. So why not do it now, figure out the kinks now, and not be left behind when everything comes back together, comes back to normal.
Oh, of course, of course. Now, what do you think of places like, or I should say, platforms like Twitch? Have you started thinking about Twitch for using? I mean, I don't even know. I have to look into this more, but I know a lot of musicians are moving from YouTube, and they're putting a lot of their stuff on Twitch as really the premier streaming platform to do everything that they're doing.
Yeah, I use Twitch, I use YouTube. I haven't been live streaming in a while actually, but I I, I use Restream to multicast on multiple platforms. Um, it's I think the benefits to there are different benefits to different platforms. So I think a lot of people move to Twitch, you become affiliate, you become partner, and you get perks with that. YouTube has its own thing where people can send you money as well. But both things require you to put time and energy at for that thing you do, your show, to grow. Um, I think it just all depends on what it is you're doing. You may have more flexibility with a platform like Twitch than you would with YouTube on certain things. Um, Twitch plays a little nicer for DJs, let's say, when it comes to music than YouTube does. But like if I do a DJ set and want to monetize the video in any way with advertising, that's not going to happen because I'm using other people's music. Twitch, maybe you can get away with, but don't quote me on that. It's it's just a nicer platform that people can use because you can do subscriptions as well.
Right, right. And I would also think too, maybe even if monetization is not part of the equation, I would wonder just putting your stuff out there and having people see and watch you do what it is you do, even if you don't make money, it plays into exactly what you're saying. If you just keep showing up, people are going to start to like what it is that you do. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they could give you tips. You know, maybe you can't make monetization off the video, but if you do say something like, you know, if you want to help out, I don't know, you know, here's a way to give me some cash, some dough, whatever you want. Or if you
Yeah.
want lessons, then we can hook up on Zoom and then you can have lessons or whatever, and you can set those up. I mean, the beautiful thing with the internet is exactly as you're saying. For as messed up as the situation is, the possibilities are. It seems like they're endless.
Hmm. Yeah. There's a he's an investor. His name is Naval Ravikant, and he said that the internet has opened. I just read this today. The internet has opened more possibilities for careers. There's something I'm paraphrasing. Hold on, I need to find this because I think it's pretty important.
The same time
the
he said that the billionaires or whatever, what is it, that the system has rewarded substandard performance in corporate America, and we should allow them to essentially cease or something like that. Is that the same guy? Am I thinking about a different guy?
say it again. I don't know if it's the same guy.
So he there's a he's one of these like business types, and he was saying, somebody was saying, well, all of these major businesses, we have to bail them out, and he was saying, well, essentially we've been rewarding substandard business practices by bailing these huge corporations out. We should allow them
Oh,
to bail because that's actual capitalism, and that's what we
yeah.
should. Is that the same guy? Because
I don't know, but that I completely agree.
right, I mean, strong word. I like opinionated people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
definitely I get excited. So go ahead. Did you find the quote?
I did. I found it. He said the internet has massively broadened the possible space of careers. Most people haven't figured this out yet.
Hmm.
So there's a lot that's possible. There's a lot that the beautiful thing is that you can do so much. The problem is that people either hold on to an old model of how things have worked, and that model is holding on to that model makes them unable to see what else is either possible or how you can adapt to a different model or create your own model and have success within that.
And it's scary, right? It's scary to look at something and to see that unknown, and then to say to yourself, well, you know what? In this unknown, I'm gonna make my own model. I'm gonna construct my own paradigm. I'm gonna find my own way to do this. As someone who is doing that, who did that during the pandemic and who's doing that now, who are some people that you listen to really solidify that frame and have that mindset down? It's a hard thing to do, and it's something that goes beyond the arts. I think. I mean, I'm sure musicians can use it and creatives can use it, but
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I do want to touch on something you just said. Like, it's scary to do that. Why is it scary? Would be my question.
I think for me, when I think of things, it's always easier to say, "Oh, so and so did it this way, so now what I can do is I can graph that. So there's a way forward, or there's a set way to go forward. It's easier to see, right? When you're looking at the unknown and it's a blank canvas, that's where you realize, okay, well, anything can happen. It's almost like you're composing. You know what I mean? Like you're looking at a blank sheet of paper and you're like, I can go anywhere I want with this. In a way, that's often scary because, you know, depending on how you're coming about it, if you have this binary relationship between mistakes and failures, no, or I should say failure, success, binary relationship, it can be very, very daunting, right? So if you take that binary relationship and you apply that to life in general, and you add the stressors and the worries of, well, you know what, I fuck this up, I'm not gonna eat. Well, if you know what, I fuck this up, I'm gonna be homeless. It can create a situation that can be very scary. You know what I mean? That's what I was thinking.
Totally. I agree. But I wanted to hear that because that's the thing that's important. And it also ties into my response to this is I have I have a creative coach and someone that's helped me through my creative process and also is helping me with my business. His name is Mike Monday. He's a just brilliant, brilliant man. And he challenges me so much. And he'll take things I say, and as a coach, and he'll challenge these notions, and he'll do exactly what I did to you. You scary. What does that mean? What do you mean? He doesn't have that voice, but I'm making it up. The and he will deconstruct the idea. So if I deconstruct what you just said, what I heard was it's scary because it hasn't been done before.
Right.
Right. I can take someone else's thing and apply it and like add my twist to it, but I know it works because someone else had success in it. Mm-hmm. And it is a scary thing when you add the fact like this is how you eat, or maybe some people have the additional factor of a family, right? So they got children to feed, or they are maybe the primary breadwinner. You have bills to pay. Like all that does factor into making not the right decisions, but making the decision that makes the most sense for you economically at the time. And I think this applies. I mean, we're talking about creatives here. So as a creative, this is the thing that we struggle with a lot. Like, what am I going to do? What can I do to make money and do my art? The ideal is you make money from your art and you got the best of both worlds. Even that has its challenges, but that's the ideal that I think most of us as performers want to have. Another way to look at it is you have a job that supports your bills and then you can still do your art. The third way of doing it is you have like the Medici family to Michelangelo. Right? You have a family of wealth or somebody that basically is a patron of the arts and supports you in that way. These models are also discussed in The Gift by, and I'm looking at the book, Lewis Hyde. It's a thick, really thick book about how do business and arts collide? When they collide, what happens? But those really are the three main ways that we have three main ways of making money as artists, right? Of making a living. And so it's tough for us to look at different models. One, when there's nobody there that's challenging us and saying, actually, there is something different and it is possible to make money. I experienced that for the first time. Like YouTube is like now a thing, or it was a thing a few years ago. But like 8 years ago, I was the tour DJ for Daystorm, huge social media guy now on Instagram. But at the time, he was the #1 subscribed MC on YouTube. And I was doing the Digi tour with him and all these other people who were making money off of YouTube. And I was like, what is this? Like literally what? Like one of my friends was like, dude, he has more Facebook likes on his page than Daft Punk. Who is this guy? Yeah. So this was in 2012, 2011, 2012. And I got exposed to people that were doing this for a living. I had no idea that this was possible. But then that opened me up to like, oh, there's this whole world, right? I remember Friday, Rebecca Black. Do you remember that song?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That broke during that time. Oh. And I remember that there was a couple YouTubers that were breaking down why it was so successful. Crazy to hear these conversations, right?
Because it was incredibly successful. You know, it was a running joke, but everyone knew that song.
Everybody knew the song, right?
There's nothing to joke about, you know?
Right. And like the whole legal battle that ensued with like Rebecca Black and the guy that made the song, the guy, I guess, like had a business where you can come in, like he'll write a song for you, you pay for it, and it's like yours, right? So then it blew up and they're like, well, who owns the song at that point? Right? Is it the guy? Like they co-wrote it? Is it hers because she paid money? And right. So it was a whole thing. And then they were talking about part of the reason of the song's success that it was the people making covers of the song make people want to click back and hear the original. And that was part of the reason why the video blew up so quick. So quick side note, but if you're interested, take a listen. But that's like exposure to something different is super important. That's why when you say scary, it's not scary when you've seen somebody else do it, because now you have a model for how it works. When you are tasked with making your own model, then it's the fear of failure is huge. Now, what is failure, right? We see failure as, we take it as a personal thing. I messed up, I'm horrible, I'm the worst, yada, yada, yada. Like it's, our self-worth is attached to us either succeeding or failing at something. But is it really? That's the question. I've recently been able, also with the help of Mike, right? Like been able to reframe what failure is. Failure is really nothing more than data. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Failure tells you what doesn't, failure just shows that this thing you did in this way doesn't work. So when you do it again, don't do that. Make these adjustments for the next time. And when we start seeing failure as just a data collecting tool of the thing that we're trying to do, then we take a step forward toward making the thing we want to do happen. And when you are at the edge of the unknown and pushing for the next thing, in creating your own model, like that's when things really start to happen. That's the scary part, living on the edge of it all. I'm also reading David Deutsch's The Beginning of Infinity, and it's deep. It is super deep. It's crazy. Highly recommend it. He's a physicist, and like the things I've been reading during the pandemic have been fun, to say the least.
So I'm hearing two things. So the first thing is this coach, I mean, this coach sounds a lot like a therapist, right? And I think that,
but he's not.
Yeah. So there's an episode that I did with a good friend of mine, Mark Ruiz, who's getting his doctorate in psychology.
Yeah.
And we're talking a lot about just how much therapy has exploded during the pandemic and how good of a thing that is, right?
Great.
Thing it is. But there's also something to be said about just being able to talk with somebody about these problematic, let's say, scripts that you might have in your head of how you. And what I'm hearing from you is this coach that you have has such a great way of breaking down these scripts in a productive way that doesn't make you question who it is you are and your successes or your failures. But what that person allows you to do is see, exactly like you're saying, failure is just a data point, right? It's just something that didn't work, exactly like you said. So then your job is to go ahead and figure out what can work.
Yeah.
Right? That's extremely, extremely powerful, I think. That's some life-changing shit in and of itself.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like, I don't know. I know you have another point, but like we've talked about problems. So David Deutsch has a quote that we've in the group of. So I also work for my coach. It's a fun arrangement, but it's me and another coach and him, and so he reads stuff, he recommends stuff to us, and sends us quotes when he comes up with ideas. Like we filter it among the three of us and talk about it. And one of the quotes that David Deutsch writes is, "Error correction is the beginning of infinity." Like thinking about what that means, I think that's the quote, but I'm paraphrasing if that's not it entirely. But essentially, that's what it is. Error correction is the beginning of infinity, and it's that I interpret that as every error corrected creates other errors, which then you correct, which then creates other errors, which then you correct ad infinitum. So Kanye, Kanye just came out, or Joe Rogan had a podcast with an interview with Kanye yesterday, and I'm like halfway in. And one of the things he said was, "I want all the smoke. When I'm on Twitter talking about, I want all the smoke, I want all the problems, so I can figure out how to solve them." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm making all these connections," because I agree. He's like, "Give me the problem so I can fix them." Mm-hmm. Nothing personal. But you got an issue, hit me. Like, let's figure it out, right? And that applies to so many areas of our lives. But anyway, it's to your point. He has a great way of reframing problems in such a way where there is no diminish of self-worth. It's just more information that we can use to make decisions with.
That's and that Joe Rogan with Kanye West is was a mind fuck to say the least. Like I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
say anything because you haven't seen the whole thing, but I'm
Like halfway in.
and the whole time I was like, wow, it's just a lot to hear him talk, and everything they talked about, and it's very interesting, super super interesting.
Yeah, and I love. Sorry. I'm a Kanye stan. I will admit it. I'm like a rare, I got people that I work with, and they just like hate him. Look, I don't agree with his politics and all that, but I feel like I have an understanding of how his mind works because I think Joe Rogan was right when he was talking about you deconstruct things, but you have to follow the train because it is like I totally understand the mind fuck that you talk about because it's a lot to follow. Um, it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, there's just a lot coming to mind. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah,
Everything
yeah.
because you brought up politics and all this, and it's such a crazy time just to be in, right? And just to be, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 years ago, you know,
Yeah,
things weren't even in my mind, and now it's like present for everybody, clear as day.
crazy.
It's a very specific, very particular time that we're in right now.
Yeah,
And okay, so for sure, this coach, right? This coach, and not this coach. He sounds like an amazing person. That's great, but it seems like somebody that can rearrange your thinking is so important, right?
totally,
You know what I mean? And
totally.
someone especially who can rearrange this binary structure of success and failure.
Yeah,
Uh, that's something that a few years ago I was reading a lot of people like that's what I was going to talk about. Tony Robbins. So Tony Robbins, of course, he's another one of these guys that it's he's kind of like Grant Cardone. He's one of these people that just gets you fired up. You listen to him talk, and he's such an amazing orator. And he's kind of cliche, but if he's cliche, there's a reason why he's cliche, right? He talks about service in this same kind of path, right? That there is no success, there is no failure. Failure is a data point kind of thing. But his main thing is service. So you can find all this error correction kind of stuff as you're choosing to serve other people. And that's where you can find meaning. And that's what will give you the motivation to do what it is that you're going to do and how you're going to figure things out. And the service can be for anybody. I mean, of course, I thought about you and the things you were doing for people in LA, but again, another place where the possibilities are super endless, right? How can you help somebody else feel better? And especially now, if you're in Starbucks, in the line of Starbucks, everybody got their mask on, just buy somebody some coffee behind you or whatever.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the possibilities are so endless in the application of these kind of topics and these concepts.
Agree, agree.
Yeah.
I feel that you were the question I feel like this also kind of stemmed from was like what else can performers do? Like if you are able to find somebody that can help you kind of look at things differently, I think that's huge. Um, but another thing is like journaling,
Oh,
I think, right? Like it's just being able to get your thoughts out and not look at them a few days later when you're removed from that feeling is a way to see like, oh well, this is what I was thinking, and I okay, well, I see where I was at, I see what was going on. Next time I think I'm going to do this, or I feel like maybe this feels like the right pathway to go. I what the pandemic is, and tell me if you agree or not, but the pandemic I think has forced us to really look inward to a large degree and see like are we happy with what's going on? One thing for me is I looked at this as an opportunity. I said this is a reset button. That's how I'm looking at it. And yeah, it's economic havoc for 99.9% of us. But I'm still seeing it as a reset button because I don't want to go back to the way things were because I didn't like it. Sure, I was making a living, things were happening, but I didn't like that trajectory. And had things kept going business as usual, I feel like I would have been unhappy with it over time. And this pandemic made me stop and say, well, did I like what was going on? No, not so much. I wanted to look this way. So now I'm doing the work to shift it toward the way that I want my career to look like. And it's hard, but if there's any time to do it, it's now.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I mean, this podcast in and of itself is a product of that. You
I'm so
know,
glad you're doing it.
right? It was one of those things where, it's exactly what you said. It was like the shock, right? And then it was, what the fuck? And then it was, how do I, what do I do? And then it was inward, right? And the journaling thing, I mean, that has become just like a central pillar of my life. Like everything revolves around that. Is magic, man. It's magic. It just allows you to see what's going on. You come back at it a few days later and you can see what patterns are coming out of it. You can see what's not working, what is working. It also, there's a weird sense of clarity that comes out of that, that to me, I had always heard, oh yeah, man, journal. Oh, you should journal for years. And I was like, I don't know, And then when you first start, for the people who I guess grew up like me or whatever, it there was a stigma around journaling, very much so. I grew up born in Oakland. I grew up kind of like lower middle class, kind of on the line, poverty line. Um, the mentality was very much you work, you work, you work, you work, you work,
Yeah.
and then you work, and then you fucking work, and then you die later.
Right.
Work. And journaling was never part of that. Self care was never part of that. Nose to the grindstone. It wasn't really until recently, that I saw, oh shit, the pandemic actually, that I started realizing self care is so important. And
So
you know what I mean? And the journaling has been an enormous part about that. And what you're saying, I agree with it completely. It's looking at, okay, this was fucked up. What do you do about it to make it better? And it's so powerful, but it's it can be difficult if you don't have that other person to kind
yeah.
of rearrange your perspective. It could be difficult, and it can be difficult to look at that and say, you know what, I can make things better.
Yes.
There are things I can do.
Yes.
So again, so if you had to recommend 3 books for anybody to check out, creative or not creative, what would they be to get this mindset? Because your mindset is so powerful, man. That's really what I wanted to delve into, and it's fascinating.
I think I'm still developing it. I mean, I'll be real as I'm thinking about book recommendations. Today was a hard day. I woke up today. I had work, so I was working with Mike, and then I have my own coaching program where I coach DJs. So uh, in the calls today, I was just off. I don't know what it was, but I wasn't feeling it. Um, I feel like I had messed up toward the end of the call, and I was feeling a little bummed about that. And not a lot of people showed up to my other call for my own business, and I've been marketing this call for a while and trying new things. And I was just like, yo, I was just having a day, and my I took a walk, and so I was able to shift my energy, and I'm glad I did because now I feel much better coming back and excited to talk to you. I didn't want to come in with that energy, but but it was a shitty day, man, and I want to be real about it. Okay, if I didn't take that walk, I would have come on and started by saying like I'm having a bad day,
Mhm.
and just been honest about it and saying like this is a part of life that I think maybe doesn't get acknowledged enough, where I for all like yesterday, I played with a Grammy winning band, bro. Like I should be on cloud nine, but I woke up feeling like something ain't right. And so it just comes to show that like no matter how successful or you somebody is, or no matter how successful I can get, that there's still a human element to me, and or to anybody who's achieved any kind of success, that it's not always what we think it is. And how do you manage these moments? Um, so I did want to talk about that today because it was a tough morning, afternoon. That fortunately shifted. Um, with books I recommend. Let's see. What have I been reading? I've just been reading. It's interesting. I never thought I'd be crazy about marketing, but because I run a business now, I love marketing. Never thought I'd say that in my life. Um, I don't. My gosh, man,
I put you on the spot.
you did.
Take your time, man. Take your time.
I feel like,
As you're thinking, I want to tell you first of all, thank you, because
yeah,
to see someone like yourself that is so successful and that has, as I see it, a very strong frame. You know what I mean? It is great to see. You also, like you just said, you have that human element, and waking up, especially, for anyone watching this, I know we have all woken up. No one knows the shit that we all are going through, right? But we're gonna wake up those days, even if the good things happen, and we're gonna wake up feeling like shit and crummy, and we're not gonna know why. And the important thing, like you did, is you took a walk. That was your recalibration,
yeah,
right? For me, it's I don't even know. It's like doing 30 minutes of burpees or something aggressive, like something, from or going to the beach, getting some sun. But it's knowing those recalibration things you can do. I guess whatever it happens, get that bad food, the whatever it is, get that bad vibe out. It's important. So I wanted to thank you for sharing that. That's just it's powerful. Everything you've been saying is powerful, man.
Oh man, I'm just repeating things I've seen, things I've heard. um, I feel like, okay, there's one book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that I think is really good about creating good habits to create the changes you want to see in your life. He has an email that he sends out every week. I highly recommend it. Uh, it's it's a solid book and really gives you the foundations or good thinking about if you want to change any habit in your life or change something in your life. You won't go from smoking to non-smoking, for example, overnight, right? You have to shift what you do. But the thing is, it's not just saying I'm going to go from smoking to not smoking. It's maybe instead of buying 2 packs of cigarettes, you buy 1 pack, right? And maybe it's like setting up your environment. I'm going to get off the smoking thing. It's let's say you want to be, because it's bad and I don't know, but let's say you want to eat healthier. Instead of buying junk food that's hanging around your house like snacks, you put water there instead, right? Or you put fruit there instead. And you set up like your environment to help support the changes that you want to make. Or if you want to run in the morning, instead of like picking out the clothes you got to wear and finding your shoes, you have everything set up by the door. So then it's one less thing for you to think about. And creating better habits is also about saving your mind from making a bunch of decisions, like having decision fatigue. That once you have decision fatigue, then you just start making like horrible decisions that you will have you going backwards toward what you don't want to do just because you don't have the willpower to make a good decision. You're decided out at that point. So that's one book. Man, oh man. Like everything I've been reading has been about advertising, direct marketing, coaching. I will recommend. So negotiation is something that I'm fascinated with. There's a book called Start with No that I recommend. Say that again. I didn't hear you.
I've heard this book. I want to read it.
It's good. It's good. It's a counterintuitive way to look at negotiation, but it's, I think, more of a real world example. And if we talk about value and thinking about how you can serve the other person, this book really comes from a place of negotiation with the other person in mind. Mm-hmm. So that's a good book.
Number 2.
On the spot, bro. Okay. All right. Here's a book. Man. Well, I'm torn about this one actually. There's 2 that I'm thinking of.
Go ahead.
One is a coaching book. And that might be like, why would a coaching book be something I recommend? Something that I've understood over the years, but more specifically in the past year and a half, in making the transition to becoming a coach, is that asking better questions leads to better answers. And so I feel like if you approach the world from a coaching perspective, really understanding why things work the way they work, or really asking people why they believe what they believe, you start getting a different sensibility about how the world works. And in that, you start asking yourself better questions and thinking differently. So one book is, where'd it go? It's called The Coaching Habit: Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever by Michael Bungay Stanier. He's a super dope author. All right, I'll give you 2 more. I'll give you 5. Okay. You asked for 3 and I couldn't decide. The other one is called Da Vinci and the 40 Answers So it's a way to look. What I like about this book is it's based on this Russian model called TRIZ. And basically, TRIZ is a way to look at something and take it apart in all these different ways to come up with different ideas about the thing you're looking at. So that's a great book about how to approach whatever it is you're doing through a completely different lens. So when, let's say, if you're looking at performing through a lens, if you're looking at performing through the lens of a consumer, performing looks one way, right? But if you look at performance through the lens of a business, let's say, a performance takes on a whole different meaning. And so it's a good book to look at different models to approach what it is you're doing. And then speaking of models, there's a book called The Great Mental Models, which basically, which basically gives you different models on how the world, not how the world works, but just different approaches to how to look at the world. And I bring this book up because models are like maps, and this is what this book in particular talks about. Maps are not a one-to-one correlation of our reality, right? But they are a model for us to look at how the world exists. So when I look at a map, I can then see how I want to navigate through an area. When you have a model of how to think, it gives you a way to approach whatever it is you're thinking about, similar to Da Vinci and the 40 Answers. And it allows you a framework to work within that then gives you an opportunity to make different decisions, make better decisions, but look at, basically just gives you extra lenses and frameworks to approach your life with. I gave you a lot. Did you follow all that? I hope I wasn't Kanyeing this interview right now.
You weren't Kanye. You weren't Kanye. Not at all. It's all. I'm gonna check out all those books. I'll put those up too in the show notes so
Yeah.
people can find them. They're all. I'm telling you, man, it's just interesting to always listen to what people are reading. You know what I mean, and to see how they're thinking about the different things they're reading, and all of these books. You know, like everything you're talking about, all these books, it just seems again like it's all this mental game. You know what I mean? And the mental game and the switching this understanding of, like we were talking about before, failures equaling just data points. You know what I mean? How can you look at a problem differently? How can you give yourself that juice that you need to go out and create whatever avenue you need to create? You know what I mean? And I appreciate you sharing that. Sorry to put you on the spot. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I'm glad you did, because I should have books ready, to recommend. And I got like, I mean, look, this is one of the books I'm reading now. What the hell? You would never expect me, you know what I mean? Like, would you expect a DJ to read a book by one of the biggest advertising, guys in the world? Like, no.
Now I would, after this podcast, I would.
Yeah, right? But it's interesting to me because I'm applying this to running my own business, but I'm also taking these ideas for like the music industry and creating my own model from that. And that's what I mean when I say, like, we are holding on to something that has worked for a period of time, but it worked for a period of time where the conditions of living were different. That's a huge thing. But let's take it specifically, like the old model of the music industry, where you sign a deal for X amount of years, X amount of albums. This is why Kanye put out all his contracts, right? Because he's like, the model needs to change. Streaming didn't exist back then. The way that people got their information was through TV, right? MTV was huge. I was thinking about this the other day, like talk shows were a big thing for artists to get new music exposed, right? You had radio, but if you wanted to see an artist outside of a music video perform, like you watch talk shows. Jay Leno was huge. Letterman was huge. Johnny Carson back in the day was big, right? All these things that, like, those shows were the equivalent of social media.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like that's one way to look at it. The Source magazine, Double XL magazine, Vibe magazine, all these music magazines were just another way for people to communicate their message to the people. But you don't need that anymore because you got social media. So the thing I recommend for all performers is to study social media, and not just like have a gram and put pictures up of yourself. I hit you with like, I've been thinking about this. Why would people want to look at your gram? If you are an upcoming artist, why do you have to have a reason to draw people in? That's what advertising is all about. You draw people into something. There's a need that they have, and in this case, the need is to be entertained. And you want to find people that are specific to the audience that you want to play for, because you are not going to be hot shit to everybody, only a particular set of people. Even think about Michael Jackson, the biggest artist arguably in the world. Him and the Beatles, let's say. Not everybody likes Michael. Let's be real, right? Not everybody knows Michael. So not everybody was a fan of the Beatles. They captured a specific portion of the world. Their portion of the world happened to be bigger than everybody else's. So we know that, right? But today, when you are upcoming, you have all these tools at your disposal. So study the way to use that effectively to your benefit, to bring people in that you want to attract, your tribe, and grow that. The way to do it 20 years ago was through television, was through radio, was through magazines, was through newspapers, interviews. That's more and more irrelevant. If you look at people who are, young folk who are growing up today, what's a newspaper? They're on iPads, they're on their phones, right? That's how they're consuming information. So whenever there's like the new thing that pops up and it's like, oh my God, I got to learn TikTok now. Like, you don't have to, it's recommended you do, but take the time out to study it and see how you can apply that to your model of how you want your business to look like, right? I can't believe that an hour flew by. I can talk about this forever. I'm telling you.
Very interesting. Do you know about Pat Flynn? Do you know who this guy is?
Yes.
Okay.
Super fans, that book.
Yeah, shout out to Pat Flynn. The niche, of course I would fuck it up, right? The riches are in the niches. That's something that he says like 24/7.
Yes.
It's all I was thinking about when you were saying this, and I think it brings so true. If you can find, as an artist, as a creative, you can find your audience, you can find your niche, and you just play to them. You just see what they want. Reach them, ask them what they want. You have ideas for whatever it is you're gonna have. Whatever it is you need, whatever step is next, they will tell you, and that's something that he says all the time. For anybody who doesn't know Pat Flynn, he focuses more on like he runs smartpassiveincome.com. He does more business stuff, online business stuff. I don't even know, man. He makes he should be checked out because a lot of what he has to say is very, very, you can implement it in many, many different ways. But again, these concepts of find out ways to use this thing called the internet and everything that's possible within it to do the things that you want to do. And I think what you're talking about is absolutely true. I mean, I remember there's a video of T-Pain. It must have been like, I don't even know, 8 years now, something like that. And he's talking about albums versus singles.
Yep.
He's like, why in the hell would I do an album? I make more money and I get more traction off the single.
Yep.
So I do the single and I do what I got to do, and it's more fun and it's less work as opposed to like a 10-track album, and it's all this other thing, all this other stuff that comes with it. And I thought, damn, he is so ahead of the curve that, man, it's not even funny. He's like light years ahead of everybody else,
Yeah.
And now you're seeing that, I mean, as I see it, albums are a thing of the past. Like, why? I mean, if you want to release an album, you release the album, but really, it probably should be the music video, and then you kind of feel where that goes, and then you release a ton of different videos, and then maybe perhaps the album is your live show that you make sure. I mean, when everything opens up or whatever, maybe it's a live stream set or whatever. That's what you pay for because you get the whole show, right? You get like an experience. It's changing. Everything is changing, exactly like you're saying. So I can listen for another 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, everything you're saying is fascinating.
That's what's up. So let me rip off what you're saying. So yes, it is changing. And the beautiful thing is you out there listening, watching, have the ability to define what that looks like for you. Like, that's a lot. And what do you even do, right? That's the crazy part. You got to dream. Like, start somewhere. Pick one platform and go. To touch on albums, the thing about also, there were not a lot of people that were putting out solid albums 20 years ago, right? How would they promote it? Put one single out, maybe 2 months before, put another single out, maybe a month, 3 weeks before. Singles generate buzz, people get excited, line up in stores, buy the album, and people have been selling platinum records, right, for a long time. Non-existent anymore, right? Taylor Swift was the only person to cross 1 million recently, 1 million downloads or sales. Just Taylor Swift. So you see the magnitude right now of where you got to be at. But part of the reason that albums were not working is because they just were not solid bodies of work. People would buy an album expecting every track to be as hot as a single, and they were getting boo-boo tracks, like just right.
That would be hella mad. What the hell?
Yeah, and so repeat that.
I paid $20 for one track. I used to get so pissed.
Yeah, it's the worst, right? So the quality control just suffered, and the music industry, really the people, the label heads, A&Rs were like, we're making money, whatever, right? It got to their head. And this is why the industry is at where it's at now, because they're idiots. But anyway, another podcast, right? So that the album as a body of work, I think, still has a place, and I agree with you. That's a wonderful way to approach it as well. Like, it's your live show now. Russ is a fantastic person to like check out his interviews and his mindset. He has a book that's also worth checking out. He was just releasing singles, and he also releases albums, right? But it's less focused on the albums than it is the singles. Nowadays, also in today's Spotify streaming world, it's not that people do not want to stream albums anymore, right? Because when Billie Eilish dropped, her album was heavily streamed, but her album was also really good, right? So there was quality there. And if you don't have, in my opinion, if you don't have the strong tracks to create a full body of work, don't put it out. Just do singles, And if you want to have a sustainable career moving forward, a body of work isn't going to cut it anymore if you just drop an album a year, because now the cycle of people's attention to like promote the music, no one's going to want to listen to things down the line. So when you spread tracks out over a period of time, you're creating consistent engagement with your fans. And that's what it's about nowadays. So the model has shifted. 20 years ago, you can drop an album once a year, once every 2 years. You'd be fine, right? But because social media has now trained people for instant gratification, you have to be a part of the conversation now. And the way to be part of the conversation is by putting things out periodically. I mean, as consistently as possible. At least once a month would be my recommendation. The more, the better. But you can't just drop an album anymore, because that's not. And for someone like T-Pain, of course, he can put a single out, have that blow up, and do minimal work to promote it, right? He doesn't have to go around, do radio runs and interview about it. He can just do live streams. He's live streaming on Twitch now with a fire intro song. I don't know if you've heard it, but it is flames, bro. You got to check it out. Two people sent it to me on Instagram, and I was like, yo, this is hot. But of course, it's T-Pain.
Love T-Pain.
Yeah.
There's something about T-Pain, Nelly. Oh my God, don't get me started on Nelly, man. My guys, man. I don't know what it is about. They just keep coming out with all this fucking fire all the time. I don't know what it is.
They got the heat, man. No, it's all good. I mean, even Jay shout out Nelly, right? The only ones moving units and Pimp Juice and us, right? Nelly was the dude. Still is the dude. But it's about today. It's about being in touch consistently with your audience, right? Coming back to Pat Flynn, super fans like this. It's staying in touch with your niche, with the people that you want to provide value for, or provide value to, the people that want to listen to you. They also want more than just a full body of work once a year. And take full body work as like a collection of 12 songs that you have. Give it to them once a month. Music videos are critical. Do what you can to put a music video out, because that makes a difference in engagement. So much gems that we're dropping here today. Everybody should be listening to this.
But yeah, I think it was, who was it? It must have been Gary Vee, because Gary Vee is on this social media shit like no one else, man. He's talking that wine thing that he did back in the day.
Wine Library TV.
Wine Library TV. He's the guy to listen to for all of this stuff. but I think it was him talking about that drip. The most important thing is the drip. It's exactly as you're saying. It's not, yeah, man. I think albums, for better or for worse, are a thing of the past. But if you, man, if you have a good song every other month, a decent music video every other month, every 2 months, something like that, and you just keep it consistent, I mean, the overhead now is so,
Yeah.
everything is so doable now. I mean, this is being shot on an iPhone. A lot of stuff is being shot on like the iPhone 12. Are you kidding me? I mean, you put $1,000 investment, and it's also your telephone. You can go shoot a music video.
Yeah.
It's everything is so doable now to have that type of value be so consistent. And for Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, all this different stuff, that consistency, I think, is that's the Midas touch for any of this to take off.
Totally. And like circling this back to live streaming, right? Like I brought up Stephanie's name. The reason I remember hers because she dripped every day. She could have dripped even once a week and I would have still brought her up, but she did it every day. So I agree with you. Drip is drip is the move moving forward.
Is the move. Well, man, we're over here at an hour and a half or an hour and 11, and I promised you an hour. Thank you so much for your time. We could keep going, and let's make this into another episode somewhere
Let's
down.
do it.
Thank you so much for everything you've said. Everything you've said has been so powerful, man. And,
Oh,
and
thanks, man.
my main takeaway from all this is that mindset, that being, developing, constructing a mindset that sees that unknown as possibility, right? But also very much looking at it proactively, right? And with a sense of handling your business. Like you were saying, okay, if you need to do some work during the day just to pay the bills or whatever, but you have this other thing going on, then do that. Invest that time, invest that effort to create the future that you want, whatever that may be, but with the belief and with the knowing that it is possible, right? And that this time, exactly like you said, it's unprecedented, but it can be unprecedented in a way that, who knows, 5 years in the future, you'll be somewhere that you never thought you would have been because you put it forth now.
Exactly, exactly. Thanks so much for bringing me on. I had a lot of fun and going back and forth. Like we could go on for another hour. I already know.
Yeah. Well, that's the next one. It's coming
Next
up.
one. I'm with it. I'm with it. Thanks, David.